Millionaire husband regrets hugging mistress when he sees his poor wife being proposed to by a CEO. Jonathan Montgomery believed he had it all: a vast estate overlooking the Hudson River, a successful business with global reach, and a radiant wife whose gentle smile lit up every elegant party they attended. But beneath the shimmering layers of designer suits and lavish galas, something was amiss. Something Jonathan refused to acknowledge. Blinded by wealth and the promise of endless affection, he thought he was untouchable. Little did he know, a single moment, a fleeting hug with the wrong woman would threaten everything. What happens when the once devoted wife, humiliated and heartbroken, receives a proposal from someone even more powerful than Jonathan himself? Jonathan Montgomery was the kind of man who commanded attention wherever he went. Tall, with sharp brown eyes and a confident stride, he seemed permanently cloaked in an aura of success. Rumor had it that the Montgomery fortune began decades ago, with his grandfather mining precious metals in the mountains of Colorado. By the time his father, Richard Montgomery, inherited the wealth, it had expanded into real estate, technology startups, and even philanthropic endeavors. Jonathan himself followed in the family footsteps, further growing their enterprises with a keen eye for rising industries. Anyone who glanced through the glossy pages of American Business Quarterly would see his beaming face, often next to his poised and elegant wife, Evelyn. They were the embodiment of a power couple. Evelyn Montgomery was no stranger to the demands of high society. Her roots were humbler. She'd grown up in a tight-knit family outside of Cleveland, working her way through college with scholarships and part-time jobs. Meeting Jonathan had felt like stumbling into a fairy tale. She was smitten not just by the glitz but by Jonathan's fierce ambition. Together, they seemed unstoppable. Their regal home in Westchester County boasted marble floors, golden chandeliers imported from Italy, and breathtaking views of the Hudson. It was a place fit for lavish gatherings, charitable galas, and private business negotiations. Every corner whispered of affluence and tradition: the carved mahogany banister in the grand foyer, the antique paintings carefully curated from Sotheby's auctions, and the meticulously trimmed gardens that sprawled across acres, hosting rare orchids and exotic koi ponds. But money and fine decor only told part of the story. Once the guests left and the hush of night set in, you could sense an emotional gap between husband and wife. Their bedroom, large enough to house a small family's entire apartment, felt cold. The bed, draped in Egyptian cotton sheets, was often half empty by sunrise. Jonathan's busy schedule had him flying from New York to London to Tokyo, sometimes on a moment's notice, while Evelyn found herself alone, stirring her morning tea at a table for two. It wasn't that Jonathan didn't love Evelyn. In the beginning, he truly did. But over the years, the demands of his global empire began to overshadow the warmth of their relationship. Text messages replaced tender conversations. Business calls ran late into the night, drowning out the gentle whispers that once bound them together. Evelyn felt a growing sense of isolation. She tried to busy herself with charitable work. She volunteered at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's events whenever possible and organized fundraisers for children's hospitals across the state. Still, that hollow feeling persisted. To the public, the Montgomerys were the epitome of marital bliss. Cameras captured them smiling at black-tie galas, clasping each other's hands at ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Society columns praised their generosity and applauded Evelyn's refined fashion sense, her shimmering gowns and impeccable taste in jewelry. Even close friends like Bianca Hastings and Mark Peterson, who had known them for years, were convinced the Montgomerys would last forever. And why wouldn't they? Jonathan gifted Evelyn with a new luxury car on their anniversary each year. He'd whisk her away on spontaneous weekend trips to the Maldives or Paris, layering experiences upon experiences as though each new memory would overshadow the unspoken distance. Evelyn smiled through it all, ever the gracious hostess, always the perfect companion. But beneath her calm exterior, a subtle ache grew. Every so often, as Jonathan left their mansion with a quick kiss on the cheek, Evelyn wondered, is this really what happiness looks like? And each time she voiced such doubts, she'd brush them away almost instantly. After all, they had built a life many envied. They had wealth, prestige, admiration. Surely nothing could shake the foundation of such a grand existence. Yet cracks were forming, hairline fractures in the polished marble of their marriage. The closeness they once shared had faded, replaced by polite pleasantries and carefully maintained illusions. They still looked the part of a united couple, but behind closed doors the laughter was muted and the affection teetered on the brink of vanishing. No one, not even Evelyn, dared to think those fractures might expand. Not until an event would shatter the equilibrium, an event as simple and destructive as a forbidden hug. Little did they know, the world they painstakingly built was about to be tested in a way that would change their lives forever. Evelyn woke the next morning to an empty space beside her. Jonathan had left at dawn for a business meeting in Manhattan. The city was buzzing with news that the famed technology mogul Lawrence Chen would be expanding his investment portfolio in New York. Jonathan, always on the hunt for lucrative partnerships, had eagerly arranged a breakfast meeting. Sighing, Evelyn shuffled to her walk-in closet. Rows of designer clothes, shoes and handbags greeted her, a testament to Jonathan's generosity. She selected a modest yet elegant knee-length dress, a pastel mint color that reminded her of spring gardens. Fitting attire for the day's agenda, volunteering at a local children's hospital fundraiser. Downstairs, Maria, their longtime housekeeper, greeted Evelyn with a warm smile and a fresh pot of jasmine tea. "Morning, Miss S. Montgomery," she said softly. "Will you be home for dinner with Mr. Montgomery?" Evelyn forced a pleasant grin. "I'm not sure, Maria. Jonathan has back-to-back meetings. But let's prepare something light, in case he comes home late." Maria nodded, concern etched on her face. She'd been with the Montgomerys for many years and had watched the couple drift apart. She often heard Evelyn pacing quietly through the empty hallways at night, and she noticed how rarely Jonathan's side of the bed seemed slept in. But Maria, ever loyal, kept her observations to herself. Evelyn arrived at the hospital around mid-morning. Bright balloons adorned the lobby and dedicated volunteers bustled about, setting up tables for silent auctions and distributing pamphlets about pediatric research. Evelyn was in her element here. She loved the sense of purpose, the earnest smiles, and the knowledge that her time and resources could make a difference. She chatted easily with doctors, nurses, and fellow volunteers, her graceful presence lending the event a certain prestige. Amid the flurry of activity, she checked her phone, scanning for any messages from Jonathan. Nothing. A day without even a quick text was not unusual, but it chipped away at her spirits. "He's probably just busy," she told herself, tucking the phone away in her handbag. Yet an undertone of sadness lingered. After several hours of fundraising, she headed to a nearby cafe with Bianca Hastings, one of her closest friends since college. Bianca was sharp-tongued but fiercely loyal, the kind of companion who'd show up at your doorstep at 3 a.m. if you needed a shoulder to cry on. Over warm bowls of tomato soup, Bianca leveled Evelyn with a direct look. "How are things at home, Evie?" Evelyn stiffened slightly. "Fine," she said, attempting a calm tone. "Busy as usual. You know Jonathan, he's always working on some new deal." Bianca's gaze didn't waver. "Look, I've known you two since you first started dating. You used to talk about everything, little jokes, big dreams, even silly fears. Now every time I see you, you're alone. If something's wrong, you can tell me." Evelyn managed a small smile. It's just the way life evolves, Bianca. We're both busy. Jonathan's business is growing, and I have my charity work. We're just in a different phase, or drifting apart. Bianca pressed, concern shining in her eyes. Evie, I'm worried about you. Evelyn gently squeezed her friend's hand. I appreciate you, but I'm fine, really. She paused, feeling the weight of her words. But if things do get overwhelming, you'll be the first to know. Promise. They parted with a warm embrace. Evelyn felt a flicker of relief. Bianca, with her directness, was the reality check Evelyn sometimes needed. Yet, as she walked back to her car, she couldn't shake the sense that, despite her protests, she was on a lonely island of her own making. That night, Jonathan didn't return until nearly midnight. Evelyn was waiting in the living room, a magazine in her lap, the grand chandelier above casting soft light around her. When Jonathan finally walked in, he seemed more exhausted than usual, dark rings under his eyes, tie loosened, suit jacket draped over his arm. "You're still up," he murmured. "I'm sorry I'm late." The meeting with Lawrence Chen ran longer than expected.